How to reinvent yourself in only 6 months with therapy. So I've been a licensed therapist for a little while now, a little over 5 years. And I've seen people go through this therapy process, very fast, and for some at a little bit of a slower rate. And what I mean by that is the amount of time that they spent in therapy. Now, one thing that I do want to say is that the amount of time that you spend in therapy does not determine if you're, let's say, crazy, messed up, or have life problems, or are not making progress, okay? So the person that has been with me for therapy, let's say 2 years, is no different from the person that's been in therapy with me for, let's say, 2 months, right? Like, everyone has their processes, right? Everyone moves at different paces. And one can even say that the person that exited therapy in 2 months, maybe they didn't have as high goals as the person who exited therapy 2 years, or that is still in therapy beyond 2 years. So this process can be different for everybody. But what I wanted to do in this podcast is to give you a 6-month roadmap to help you to reinvent your life with therapy. And the reason why 6 months is because it took me 6 months to actually learn this framework. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this framework month by month of what you should do in order to turn your life around. This is the same framework that I give my therapy clients, and I'm here giving it to you absolutely free through this podcast. And if you want future podcast episodes like this where I'm sharing you gems that I share in my therapy sessions, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss another episode. Now, I'll even tell you this about that, right? 80% of people that hear me say subscribe to this podcast, they're not going to do it. And as a result, they're going to stay exactly where they are, just listening to another podcast and not taking action. And hey, that's fine. But for the 20% of people that do, they will be rewarded. Trust me when I say they will be rewarded. Their lives will change. And I want you to be a part of that 20%. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. So month number 1. If you're looking to reinvent yourself, the first thing that you need to do is you need to find out what your values are. The values are essentially a roadmap for the life that you want to live. Without this, you'll be lost. And you'll be lost no matter how much driving you do. It is literally like getting in a car and not setting up your GPS system. If you're in Miami and trying to get to Washington State, so the opposite side of the country, and if you're trying to do that without a roadmap, you could be driving for literally days and find yourself in New York, find yourself in Texas, thinking that you're in Washington. And that's how a lot of people are going through life right now. They have no roadmap, they have no guide, and it's because they're not setting time to actually set those things, to find out what their destination is. There's a really great book that I read with my book club, and it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And habit number 2 is to begin with the end in mind. And that is literally what we're doing. We're beginning with the end in mind, because without this, everything else is pointless. But I'll even give you another reason why setting your values are important. And it's important because life is hard. And here's the thing, life can be really hard, right? But if you don't have values, you won't find a reason to push through that hardness. And that's where your values come in. Your values are set to help you, to give you the motivation to push through that wall of depression, that wall of anxiety, that wall of imposter syndrome, whatever your wall is. You'll be able to push through that if you have a reason to do it. But if not, you're gonna fall. You're gonna tell yourself that it's not worth it, and you're gonna find some other aimless route to take that's gonna probably lead you back to Miami, right? It's going back to that example. So going back to where you were. And as a result, you just spend all that time just doing nothing. So month number 1 is all about finding your values. And a really great way to do this is to segment your life into 4 different domains. So the first domain that I talk to my clients about is the career and education domain. And it's literally what it sounds like. It's everything that you do in terms of your business, your careers, or the education if you're in college or some type of formal education. Everything that you value in that area, you need to write those things down. Now, the second area is relationships. So this is not just your romantic relationships, but it's your family, your friends, it's your coworkers, your neighbors, people in the community. Your relationships are everything, and we want to make sure that we're taking time to value those things. The third area is leisure time. So what do you do to get away from work, to get away from stress, and to recharge yourself? And then the fourth area is personal growth and personal health. So what are you doing to take care of your mental, your physical, to energize you? What are some personal goals that you set for yourself? These are all things that are crucial when it comes to reinventing yourself, and we want to take time to find those values. So if you're listening to this podcast, and this is your first time ever listening to a therapist, if you've never been to therapy, and even if you have been, I would tell you to write those 4 domains down and then literally go to Google and type in a list of values. Literally just type in list of values and click on images, and you should see a couple images that are giving you a list of over 50, 60, or maybe even 100 values. Your job is to pick 3 values for each of those 4 domains. And again, I gotta challenge you guys on this. Some people are going to do it. Other people are going to say, oh, that sounds nice, I'll do do it later. Don't be that person. Actually take the time to do it. Every step you take not doing this is you driving in circles, not knowing where you're supposed to be. And that is a waste of time, money, and energy. And you don't have to do that. All right, month number 2. So in this month, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take those values that you just wrote down, and what we're gonna do, and you're gonna hate me for saying this, but you're gonna write down goals for those values that you just set. Now, as I say that, I probably lost half my listeners. Half the people have probably exited out of this because they've heard this before. They've heard, hey, you should write goals. You should write them down. You should have this and that, right? You've heard this before, but for some reason, you're still struggling with this. For some reason, all the gurus, right? And I'm using air quotes, all the gurus, every therapist, so myself included, have said write down goals. And we're not saying this just to say this. It's because it actually works. But again, for a lot of people, they aren't going to do it. But you are going to do it because you're listening to this podcast and you already made it this far. So you want to write down goals. And when you write down goals, you need to make sure it has these 3 components. The first component is that your goals need to have deadlines. The reason why is because we want to ask ourselves, when do we want to have these goals completed by? That is what gives us the pressure and the anxiety to actually do the things that we sometimes don't feel like doing. And yes, I said the word anxiety because anxiety can actually be used as a tool to help us and not necessarily harm us. And this is what deadlines do. When I'm working with my clients, I always ask them, hey, what is it that we're going to have accomplished by next time we meet? What is it that we're going to work on? And the reason why is because when next time we meet, I want to have something to hold them accountable to. And trust me when I say they really, really appreciate that, okay? And I'll even say this, like if my client doesn't have the work done, a lot of times I'll tell them, hey, let's do it right now because we want to hold these deadlines true. We want to stay accountable. We don't want to be too flexible in this area because we don't want to find, let's say, excuses to not do things, okay? So we want to have deadlines. So that's number 1. Number 2, we want to have subset actions for each goal that we set. So I want you guys to think of this as like a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, we have our values. In the middle part of that pyramid, we have our goals. And then at the base of that pyramid, the most important piece, the foundation, right, is the actions. It's the actions, guys. Now, the reason why we want to break our goals down is because if we look at our goal and it's the size of Mount Everest, we may procrastinate on that goal because it looks like it's going to take a lot of energy. But if we break our goals down to something similar to like a stair step, right? So a stair step that's in your house, we may feel like, okay, I can do that. And that's where the momentum comes. That's where the motivation comes. It comes from just us seeing ourselves take a little bit by a little bit of action, right? Getting just a little bit better each and every day. That's where we start to believe that this big goal known as Mount Everest is actually possible. And then the last component that you want to have when it comes to goals is accountability. Okay, accountability. Now, there's a really great study, and I gotta admit, this blew my mind, but it was a really great study that was done by the University of California. And they stated that when you do not write your goals down and you do not have an accountability partner, there's a 33% chance that you're gonna accomplish that goal. 33% chance. Now, for the people that write down their goals, they write down the actions, and they have an accountability partner, studies show that those people have a 76% chance of accomplishing their goals. So literally double. Now, to me, that sounds amazing. I need you guys to know that you need to write your goals down and have an accountability partner with these goals. Because trust me, if you have a goal such as become a millionaire, I think you will love the 76% chance of getting to that $1 million rather than a 33% chance, all right? And I'm just guessing, right? Like, think about it. You're not adding that much work when it comes to the goals, but think about it. You're able to double the percentages, double the chances of actually accomplishing that goal, right? So all I'm asking you to do is take the goals that you have in your head and write them down on a sheet of paper. Write down some actions, right? Actions, deadlines, and find an accountability partner. This could be a coworker, this could be a friend, this could be a loved one, it could be a therapist like myself. There's so many different ways that you can find that, but I don't want you to overthink it, all right? I don't want you to overthink it. And again, you have a month to do this, right? You literally have a month. Now, I wasn't gonna add this in this podcast, but I'll give you guys a gem just because you're still listening. So what I tell my clients when they're struggling to take actions towards their goals is to focus on this 2-step process. The 2-step process is you asking yourself, what can you do within 24 hours in regards to this goal? In 24 hours, what can you do in regards to this goal? So this is going back to the idea of breaking these goals down, right? Now, the second question that you need to ask yourself is on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being that this action that I'm about to take is incredibly easy, and 1 being that it is incredibly hard. What what actions are at least a 7? All right. So what I'm trying to get you to see is what can you do within 24 hours that is extremely easy, right? Extremely easy and has a high probability of you accomplishing it. That is what I want you to ask yourself. And that will help you to start to build that momentum and accomplishing these goals. So month number 1, we're finding out what it is that we value. Month number 2, we're writing these goals down and we're finding an accountability partner. All right. Month number 3 in regards to reinventing yourself is for you to write down all the unhelpful stories that you're telling yourself. You know, believe it or not, who we are today is a result of who we've been and the stories that we've been telling ourselves. And that's how a lot of people have been going about life, right? It's these stories that maybe someone has told them about themselves. So it could be, parents, it could be bullies, it could be, our own failures, right? What tends to happen is that our stories develop from these situations and we carry these stories with us like a backpack. And if we're not careful, we'll start adding story after story after story that is very unhelpful, very unproductive for who we want to be. And what I want you guys to do is to stop and actually write down these stories and really start to develop an awareness of what these stories are and even where they come from. I had a real great friend. I was having an honest conversation with him one day, and one day I told him that sometimes, I lack a little bit of confidence, believe it or not, even as a therapist, sometimes my confidence may not be there. And I remember talking to him, and he asked me a great question. He said, "Where do you think that comes from?" And instantly, guys, I was able to tell him that it came from me playing basketball. And it wasn't because I was good. It was because I was unfortunately not that good of a basketball player, despite being a very tall guy. And the reason why is because, my anxiety used to get the best of me. And it all started when I was in not elementary school, but it all started when I was in middle school. And I remember missing the game-winning shot for my team. And that was something that absolutely broke me. And it broke me because of all the jokes that people made about me the next day that I was in school. And what that taught me was that I shouldn't take chances. I shouldn't take shots, right? I should play safe and stay on the sidelines. I should pass the ball and not be aggressive. And that was something that I carried with me for a long time, guys, a very long time. But what was tough about that was that, I didn't know why I wasn't being aggressive with my goals. I didn't know why I was lacking the confidence I was lacking. And it wasn't until he told me or he asked me, where did I think that lack of confidence came from? And I was able to go back to that moment. Now that I realize where this moment comes from, I'm able to give it its own identity. I'm able to tell myself that story of me missing that game-winning shot is not who I am today. That was decades ago. And I do not have to carry that with me. And for a lot of you guys, you've been carrying stories with you from decades ago. And it's now time for you to let go of that story. And to do that, you first have to realize what stories are you still carrying with you. Once you have that list of stories, I would love for you to then write new stories that you'll love to carry with you, new beliefs. What I tend to see is that there are a lot of people who have been told that they've been great or that they've done great things or they've literally had success in their own lives, but it's been hard for them to believe it. And the reason why is because they're still holding on to this old story of who they are. Trust me when I say, if you were to stop and look at the stories that you have, good or bad, if you were to start from that point, it would change your life drastically. Because what you would then be able to do is to decide what stories you would love to take with you as you move forward in creating this new life. All right. Like the thing is that I'm trying to get you guys to see is, and I'll give you guys an example. It's kind of like going to the grocery store and you have all these apples and oranges and things like that, bananas. And when you go into a grocery store, you're able to stop and look at what fruits are good and what fruits are not. And trust me when I say, you're going to pick up the good fruits. So the good apples versus the bad apples. And you're going to take those and you're going to buy them because they're helpful for you. We want to treat our thoughts the same way. We want to treat our stories the same way. Okay. So month number 3 is all about identifying the stories that have been holding you back and then picking up the stories that will move you forward, that will further push you in the direction that you want to be. Month number 4, when you're trying to reinvent yourself using therapy, is all about mindfulness. There's a scene in The Last Dance with Michael Jordan that not a lot of people talk about. And the reason why is probably because it's in one of the last episodes. But in the last episode of The Last Dance, Michael Jordan actually talks about how Phil Jackson went and got a mindfulness guru to work with the team. The reason why he did this is because he knew that eventually the team would have to go and face against the Utah Jazz. And the thing that made the Utah Jazz really tough to beat was the fact that they had the #1 crowd in all of the NBA. It was by far the loudest crowd that the Bulls would ever play in. And what they needed to be able to do is to go into that gym and perform the way that the Chicago Bulls needed to perform, the way that they've always performed. And to do that, they needed to be able to be present. Right now, month number 4, right? You've got your goals. You got your values. You've identified the stories that are holding you back and stories that will move you forward. Like, you've done all that work. And now it's time for you to really start to put your foot on the gas. Because in month 4, you may find yourself losing a little motivation. You may find yourself, starting to doubt, is this really for me? And when those thoughts start to creep in, we need to be able to lock in and put our best foot forward. I tend to tell my clients, and I even tell myself, that mindfulness is kind of like you turning on your high beams in the middle of the snow, in the middle of the rain, in the middle of the fog. In other words, when that road is unclear, it's your mindfulness, it's the high beams that you're going to turn on that's going to help you to be able to stay on that path just long enough back to where the weather is really, really nice and you're able to get through this journey that we're on, if you will. For a lot of people, they believe that mindfulness is something that sounds nice. Maybe it's something that I will do, but they never really prioritize it. And when you're in month number 4 and you're just going through the grueling part of it, right? You're kind of going through those like quote unquote harsh winters, as they say, right? Like, I need you to be able to now really focus on what you need to do next. I can't tell you how many times I've sat with clients, or even in my own journey, where there's a lot of things going on right now, right? There's a lot of, let's say, actions that you should be taking. There's a lot of things that your mind is telling you. In month number 4, you've probably tried some things and failed. So your mind is just, it's just a loose cannon right now. And what I need you to do is actually pause for a second and ask yourself, what is just the next step that I need to be working on? I remember I was talking to a client one day, and I had brought something up to them, right? I don't want to go into detail too much about it, but I brought something up to them about what they could be doing like 3 years, 5 years down the line. Like, it was a really big goal. And as a result, their anxiety started to raise during the session. And I said, yo, my bad. I threw you out in the middle of the sea without a raft, and I need to bring you back to where, like, we're just putting our feet in the water. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that I needed to make these next goals, these next steps very clear for them, and not get them overwhelmed with what could happen later down the line. Because who we are right now is going to be an indication of what we've done in the past. And right now, to get to where we want to be, so to accomplish that really big goal down the line, we need to go through this path that we're currently on. We need to accomplish these next goals, because it's going to be these next small steps that's going to create the person you need to be in order to accomplish that goal that's down the line, right? Something that I think a lot of people skip, and I sent the email to my group about this. A lot of people, they get discouraged when the path is hard, but this hard path is required in order to make sure that you're able to handle the dreams that you're asking for. Because when you're given this dream, if you're not able to handle it, you're going to lose it. And one can argue that the grief of losing that dream may be even worse than you have never making it at all. Think about that. Like, you having this dream and losing it. So let's say, I don't want to go here, but let's say it's a marriage, right? Let's say it's a marriage. Let's say that's your dream, that's your goal, but yet you skipped therapy. You didn't go through premarital counseling. You never done any work on yourself. You never addressed any of your childhood traumas or your previous relationships that failed. Let's say you just didn't address any of that, and then you got married. And then let's say you were to lose that marriage because of all the things that I've just mentioned. I think that heartbreak may be even worse than you have not ever getting married to begin with. This is why that path is so necessary. And this is why I need for us to practice mindfulness, so that we will be more willing to go through this path step by step, day by day. You cannot skip this part of the journey. So mindfulness is a real good way to bring yourself back whenever things get tough. So I'll give you a quick mindfulness technique. It's real simple. I actually have a client doing this right now, and it's mindfulness eating. When you eat, normally a lot of people are eating while they're on their phones, watching a movie, right? Maybe even driving, which isn't the safest thing to do. And as a result, they're not able to really be present with the food that they're eating. They're not able to enjoy it. So what I have this client do, and I've had several of my clients do, was to practice mindfulness eating, which means them turning off all electronics and just simply sitting in the room. And before they actually eat the food, I ask them to notice it. Notice the different colors of the food. See if you can smell the food. As you touch it, see if there's different textures that you can notice. Maybe it makes a different sound. Maybe there's a different weight to it than you expected, right? So many different things. And then as you eat it, really take your time to savor each bite. See if you can notice the different spices and the different foods that's in this food that you're eating, right? Really take your time and be present with it. The reason why we want to do this is because we're going to take that same level of focus, that same level of mindfulness, and when you're, let's say, speaking to someone because you're struggling with social anxiety, or let's say you're doing a podcast like this and you struggle with being confident on camera. I need you to be very much in the moment, focus, so that you can say what you need to say, do what you need to do, so that you can get your point across, so that you can accomplish the goal at hand. Because your mind may throw a lot of stuff at you, right? Going back to the snow, the fog, the rain, like there may be a lot out there. And I just need you to know how to focus and how to lock in. So that's just one mindfulness technique, but there's so many out there. But mindfulness, and I'll say this and then we'll go to the next point. Mindfulness is the blade that cuts through any self-doubt that you have. Month number 5 is all about embracing the suck. So there's a saying that the Navy SEALs had or have, which is called embracing the suck. Now, the Navy SEALs training is, it's historically known as one of the toughest trainings out of all the military branches. So for one, their training is a year long versus the Marines and all the other branches, they're normally about 3 months. So to be a Navy SEAL, you have to go through a year of probably one of the most grueling workouts that you've ever been through. And there's been data that has said that the Navy SEALs, right, their dropout rate in their training programs is 85%. So a lot of people don't make it, right? 85% of people decide, you know what, this is too tough and I'm going to quit. I'm just going to call it and just quit. Now, the reason why this happens, and this is actually why they have the saying, is because the idea of embracing the suck comes from this idea that right now things may not be perfect, all right? In month 5, you've been doing everything that you need to be doing up until this point, right? So going back to the geography example that I gave, if you're in Miami and you're driving to Washington, you're probably somewhere around, let's say like Utah or Idaho, right? And I'm kind of testing my geographical senses, but let's say you're in Idaho, right? So you're almost there. Right now, you've probably had a couple of tire changes, oil changes, right? Like you had to stop and get gas quite a few times. And right now it's getting really tough, right? It's really hard. And what I really need you to do is to embrace the suck for all the reasons that I mentioned in the previous point, because it's that journey that's going to actually create the person you need to be in order to maintain this dream that you're asking for. And this is what embracing the suck is all about. It's embracing the idea that right now things are not perfect, and that is okay because eventually things will get better. I even give you guys another example, another metaphor that you can use about embracing the suck. And really what I'm saying about this is it's all about acceptance at this point. Accepting that some days is not going to be great. Some thoughts may not be perfect. Some of my performances may not be ideal. And that is actually okay because I'm willing to show up the next day. So I'll give you guys another metaphor. So this comes from Sun Tzu. So who he is he was a famous, well-known Chinese military general, if you will. And he wrote a book called The Art of War. And in this Art of War, he gives so many different tactics of how to take down your enemy. And one tactic that he wrote that I absolutely love was that he said the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And it's like, whoa, this military general is telling me that I should try to subdue my enemy, meaning I should conquer my enemy without fighting them? And the answer is yes. And you can do the same thing with your anxiety, your depression, and all the trauma that you've been through. You can subdue the enemy. You can subdue those thoughts and those feelings without fighting them. And the way you do that is through accepting them. I think we have a bad rap in this world where there's this belief that in order to be perfect, your past has to be perfect, your thoughts have to be perfect, your feelings have to be perfect. In order to have a good life, you have to feel good. And that is not the case. If that was, then trust me, I would probably have a lot more clients than I do now. My goal with all my clients is to show them that you can actually have a great life when things aren't great. You can be confident even when you're not feeling confident. And that's kind of the phase that I'm entering in my life, where I'm willing to show up even when things don't feel comfortable. I don't know if I said this earlier on in my podcast, but I had a client who was talking to me about the values piece. So going back to month number 1, he said that he heard a podcast or someone say that you should find goals that are worth failing for. And when he told me that totally shifted everything for me. And what I loved about that is that it embraces this idea of failure. Failure is one of those things that really serves as a stepping stone to getting to where you need to be. Failure is, or rather success, and I believe it was Henry Ford that said this, but he simply said success is going from failure to failure without losing any motivation. That is what success is, because this life is, man, trust me when I say it's going to be filled with failure. And any great goal that you have, any dream that you have that's worth dreaming is going to be a tough one. And as a result, there will be some failures on your path, which is why the last 2 months we've been focusing on mindfulness and being able to let go of the stories that we tell ourselves. And all of that is because we want to now embrace that sometimes our performances won't be perfect. Our outcomes won't be perfect. The thoughts, the feelings we have won't be perfect, but that part is okay. So again, make sure you embrace the suck. And as Sun Tzu says, subdue the enemy. And this can include your mind without fighting. That is the supreme art of war. All right, so month number 6, and the fact that you've made it this far listening to this podcast, it tells a lot about who you are. It says that you're someone that is a completer, you're someone that is a finisher, and that right there will help you to get past 80% of your competition. That right there is probably one of the biggest indicators of success. It's your ability to stay persistent. So I'm glad you guys made it this far to this channel. And if you want, please subscribe to this episode, right? Subscribe to this channel. If you do that, you will continue to receive life-changing information like this absolutely free. So in month number 6, it is all about self-reflection. The reason why we want to do this is because a lot of people don't take time to reflect on what's going right versus what's going wrong. Something that I used to love doing when I was doing my webinars about a year ago was that after each webinar, I would write down a list of things that went well, but also a list of things that didn't go well. And what I would do before I shot my next episode or my next webinar, I would review that list before I shot the webinar and make sure that I added the improvements that I said needed to be improved. By doing that, each episode, each webinar got just a little bit better each and every time. Now, for a lot of people, they're not doing that. I'll actually love to ask, when was the last time you reflected on the previous week and ask yourself what went well and what didn't go well? Gives you a lot to think about, right? I think for a lot of people, what they do, and I do this on my birthday, and then also on the first of the year, so January 1st, I tend to look back on what things have gone well and what things I need to improve in. If I were you, I would choose those 2 points to start with if you haven't been reflecting on, your life, your goals, your actions, your results. Take time to really reflect on what goes well and what doesn't go well. It's kind of like a science project, right? Where you're looking at, well, if I add this new chemical, if we try something new over here, what would be the results? It's kind of like experimenting, if you will. It's the same thing that we want to do here, because for the last 5 months you've been working really hard to change your life, and you have a lot of data. You have 5 months worth of data, and what you want to do now is you want to see what goes well, what works rather, and what's not working. And here's the thing, don't be surprised if some of those things actually includes people. I don't want you to be afraid of letting go of people or adding people or even paying for people to help you. So this may come in the form of a coach or a therapist, because what we want to do is we want to double down on things that's actually working for us. If we do that, it will ensure that the next 6 months is going to be just as successful or even more successful than the past 6 months, okay? So month number 6 is all about self-reflection. We're going to review those goals, and I'll even say this, review your values, because here's the thing, values over the course of time, they change. What I valued as an 18-year-old was definitely different from what I value as a 26-year-old, and it's definitely different than what I value right now as a 31-year-old, right? Like it changes, if you will. It's going to be the same thing that happens with you as well. And we want to make sure that the path that we're on is still the correct path for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize the 6 things that you need to do over the course of the next 6 months in order to reinvent your life. So month number 1 is all about figuring out what it is that you value, okay? And I gave you guys a real great example of how to do that. Month number 2 is all about setting your goals. Remember, you're able to double your chances of success by simply having a goal that's written down, having action steps, and then also having an accountability partner. Those 3 things will help to double your chances of success. Month number 3 is all about writing down the unhelpful stories and then seeing what are the helpful stories that you are having right now, that you're experiencing right now. And we want to learn how to identify and notice the unhelpful stories so that way we can let go of them whenever we're trying to take an action. Month number 4 is all about doubling down on your ability to be present. It's all about mindfulness. And I use a great example from The Last Dance of how Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls used mindfulness to go into Utah and beat Karl Malone and John Stockton in Game 6. You know this as the shot. And then the next month number 5 is all about embracing the suck. That is something that a lot of Navy SEALs talk about. And also the quote from Sun Tzu is to subdue your enemy without fighting. He says that is the supreme art of war. And then the last point, month number 6, in this month you need to reflect on things that are going well and things that are not going well, and just simply make the adjustments. So thank you for checking out this podcast. My name is Coach Wells. I'm a licensed therapist, and I see you in the next episode.